Well, hello there. Welcome to Chapter 10 review video. I'm Danny.
I'm Ann.
I'm Katie. And this is Lydia.
And Albert.
Our first topic of discussion will be classical conditioning.
Classical conditioning is the pairing of a neutral stimulus with an unconditioned stimulus.
For example, when I shake the food bowl, my cats come running into the kitchen by their food dishes. In this example, the unconditioned stimulus is the thinking of the food in their bowl. The unconditioned response is the cats running towards the food. The conditioned stimulus is the noise the bowl makes when the food is shaken. The conditioned response would be the cats running towards the food. Emotional conditioning is a type of classical conditioning where the conditioned response is emotional.
If you got a chest bag, it'd look like this. How would you feel? Not good, right? Over time, you become emotionally conditioned to relate the color red to failure and anxiety.
Next, we will be talking about negative and positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is when you do something good and get something bad taken away, like when you get an A on a test and in return you do not have to do a chore.
Positive reinforcement is when you do something good and get something good in return, like when you get an A on a test and you get $5. Vicarious reinforcement is when you see someone else do something and be rewarded with positive reinforcement. You want to do that same action as well to receive that same reward. Like when you see someone get an A and receive $5, you want to get an A so that you can get $5.
I want to get an A so I can get $5.
The confidence in having the ability to carry out a certain action is called self-efficacy or efficacy expectation according to Bandura.
Confident I can do that.
Sadly, this can develop into expecting this reinforcement, or in this case, the $5, every time you complete this action, or get an A. This is called outcome expectancy, and is also a good example of observational learning. An example of a continuous reinforcement is if every time you read 10 pages of a book, your parents give you a nickel as a reward. This is also an example of a fixed ratio. Partial reinforcement, on the other hand, is not always receiving a nickel after reading 10 pages. If you got a nickel every 2 weeks, regardless of how many pages you read, that is an example of fixed interval. Partial reinforcement effect shows up when reinforcement stops. If you take away the continuous reinforcement of the nickel, you will quickly stop reading the 10 pages. But if you take away the partial reinforcement of the nickel, you will most likely keep reading the 10 pages longer, because it is more resistant to extinction.
Extinction is when parents stop giving you the nickel after reading 10 pages. Successive approximation is gradually training a person to perform a certain task by reinforcing any response that comes close to the desired behavior. For example, when a psychology professional works with a picky eater, they use successive approximation to reward any movement toward the disliked food. They will gradually work towards eating the disliked food by taking steps like looking at a picture of the food, being in the same room as the food, touching the food, and eventually putting it in their mouth. This whole process is called shaping. During the Bobo doll experiment, children were exposed to either an aggressive model or a non-aggressive model. The result of this experiment was that children were more likely to participate in aggressive behavior if they were exposed to the aggressive model. This is an example of observational learning. Repeated exposure to violence desensitizes observers to human suffering. For example, people who play violent video games tend to feel less empathy towards real-life shootings. Thanks for watching our Chapter 10 review video. We'll see you next time.